If Earth's natural history is a ruthless arena of survival, then we humans were born at the finish line. But it was the wrong finish line. We entered the game with a fatally flawed set of stats. No sharp claws, no armor-plated skin, and worst of all, a devastatingly inefficient way to reproduce. Look at the Pleistocene savanna to witness this grim disparity. A mother giraffe stands upright during labor. Her newborn drops from a height of 2 meters, a painful collision with the earth. Yet in less than an hour, the calf wobbles up on 4 slender legs. This is not a miracle. It is a mandatory condition for survival. Zebras and antelopes obey an iron law. If you cannot run the moment you leave your mother's womb, you become a hot meal for a saber-toothed cat. Evolution sculpted these prey animals into entities ready for battle from their very first breath. But what about humans? According to every law of nature, we should have been eliminated millions of years ago. We were an evolutionary glitch, a seemingly failed product. So how did these terribly flawed creatures not go extinct? The answer begins with a scream. The birthing room of our ancestors was a battlefield of blood, sweat, and agonizing cries. The prehistoric mother writhes in unbearable pain on the cold, unforgiving stone floor. She is surrounded by tension, primitive tools, and absolute terror. There are no sterile rooms, no anesthetics, just raw, brutal nature. And sometimes, the only outcome of this horrific ordeal is the tragic loss of 2 lives. But when they do survive, what is the reward for this life or death struggle? A tiny, red, screaming newborn, so hopelessly weak that merely keeping its own head upright is an impossible task for months. Compare this to the rest of the wild kingdom. A saber-toothed cub can already crawl actively and aggressively mere moments after birth. Yet a human child requires nearly an entire year just to stand on 2 shaky feet. It takes years before they can even feed themselves. In the harsh, prehistoric world, these infants were nothing but walking targets for the horrors lurking in the dark. The evolutionary math simply doesn't add up. We were practically born as bait. So why did evolution curse human mothers with such a brutal, deadly process? To decipher this paradox, we must travel back in time, 4 to 6 million years ago. It was then that our ancestors made a fateful, world-altering decision. They stood upright on 2 legs. Bipedalism freed their hands to craft tools, to carry food, and to hurl weapons. Most importantly, it triggered a massive biological explosion in the brain. A chimpanzee's brain measures around 400 cubic centimeters, but the early human brain skyrocketed to 1,400 cubic centimeters. A massive hardware upgrade. But nature never hands out gifts without a devastating price tag. To walk efficiently on 2 legs, the hominid pelvis had to narrow and thicken. It was forced to support the vertical weight of the entire upper body against gravity. This created a deadly geometrical problem. On one hand, the skull grew larger and heavier. On the other hand, the gateway for the child to enter the world became desperately narrow. The collision between a massive brain and a tiny pelvis is the root cause of this agony, a structural conflict that no other animal on Earth is forced to endure. In this desperate prehistoric reality, with no hospitals or ultrasound machines, how could a woman know that a new life was forming inside her? The answer was not found on the ground beneath her feet. It was written in the vast, starry night sky. The moon served as humanity's very first biological clock. Its cycle of 29.5 days mirrors the natural 28-day biological cycle of the female body almost perfectly. Look, the moon has turned full twice, yet the blood has not flowed. An ancient mother might have communicated this to her tribe by the fire. They learned to read the cosmos to understand the secrets hidden within their own bodies. The ultimate proof of this lies in the famous Ishango bone, discovered in the heart of Africa. Carved into the leg bone of a prehistoric baboon are highly deliberate, sequential notches. Mathematicians believe this was not just a simple counting tool for hunting. It was the diary of a prehistoric woman, tracking the moon to predict her time of birth. Those scratch marks were humanity's first pregnancy test, the absolute dawn of preventive medicine. But after confirming the pregnancy, the prehistoric woman faces a new horror: morning sickness. The terrible nausea that plagues modern mothers is actually a highly advanced biological security system. In the prehistoric wild, food was a gamble. It was filled with parasites, deadly bacteria, and plant toxins. During the critical first trimester, the baby's vital organs are just beginning to form. Just one bite of the wrong leaf or tainted meat could trigger a fatal miscarriage or severe deformities. Do not eat that, it smells wrong. The mother's brain activates a radical override, heightening her senses of smell and taste to extreme levels. It fiercely rejects anything bitter, because in nature, bitterness is the universal warning sign of poison. It creates an intense disgust for rotting meat, the primary source of the most dangerous pathogens. When the prehistoric mother violently throws up her food, she is not sick. She is actively flushing out potential threats to the womb. The women who suffered the most severe morning sickness were actually the ones fiercely protecting their unborn children the best. However, this vital rejection of food immediately triggered another deadly crisis: a severe lack of minerals, forcing the pregnant mother to do the unthinkable. The growing fetus acts like a biological parasite, draining the mother's body. It ruthlessly extracts calcium directly from her bones and steals essential iron straight from her bloodstream. Driven by an uncontrollable primal urge, she does something horrifying to modern eyes. She plunges her bare hands into the dense, wet river mud, and she eats the raw earth. This is not madness. It is a brilliant biological survival tactic known as geophagy. Specific types of prehistoric clay are incredibly rich in calcium, magnesium, and iron. But more importantly, the fine clay particles act like a microscopic sponge. They bind to the deadly plant toxins and dangerous parasites in her gut, trapping the poisons safely before they can ever reach the fragile, unborn child. Tens of thousands of years later, humanity still relies on this ancient instinct. We are selling the exact same dirt our ancestors ate, a pharmacist might say, because many diarrhea medications today are literally made from the very same purified clay. What we call advanced medicine is simply an inheritance of prehistoric survival. And then, the final and most terrifying moment arrives: the delivery. For other primates, giving birth is a relatively straight, simple path. But for a human, the birth canal is a deadly, twisting, spiral labyrinth. A newborn's head circumference is massive compared to the narrowest point of the pelvic opening. It is physically comparable to pushing a heavy, giant boulder through an impossibly small ring. To survive this narrow gap, the child cannot simply push straight out. It must execute a complex, highly dangerous sequence of twisting movements. It tilts its heavy head upon entering, rotates 90 degrees in the middle, and twists one final time just to force its shoulders through the bone. But this brutal corkscrew rotation creates a fatal, uniquely human flaw. The baby emerges with its face turned away, facing the mother's back. If the mother, panicked and alone, reaches down to pull her child out, she risks bending the child's neck backward, instantly snapping its fragile spine. This is the ultimate, terrifying evolutionary checkpoint. A human mother simply cannot survive this ordeal alone. This evolutionary dilemma forced our ancestors into a profound realization. They had to become a highly social species. Right there, in those dark, terrifying prehistoric caves millions of years ago, the very first medical profession was born: the midwife. Breathe! The head is coming. Gently rotate the child's shoulder to the left. Hold the bleeding. Press these crushed herbs against the wound. The hands of these early midwives did more than just pull a child into the light. They were the first living databases of medical knowledge. They knew exactly which posture reduced the crushing pain of labor. They knew which rare wild flora could stop a fatal hemorrhage. The presence of a third person in the birthing room changed everything. It transformed a deadly, isolated biological crisis into a deeply bonding cultural event. Anthropologists call this obligate midwifery. We survive because we learn to borrow each other's hands. But the story of human survival does not end in the birthing cave. There is a greater mystery. Why do human females live decades past their reproductive years? Many believe prehistoric humans only lived to be 30. But this is a cruel statistical trap. Massive infant mortality dragged the average life expectancy down. If a child survived the brutal gauntlet of predators and disease, they could easily live into their 70s. Why did evolution preserve these aging individuals who could no longer bear children? Evolutionary biologists call the answer the grandmother hypothesis. Rather than facing the lethal risks of late pregnancy, an older woman shifts her energy to protecting and raising her grandchildren. In a world without writing, the grandmother's memory was the tribe's primary operating system. She was a living database of survival. She knew which wild herbs could soothe a burning fever in the middle of the night. During a brutal, relentless drought, she knew exactly where to dig for hidden, water-filled tubers. These grandmothers, these ancient engineers of life, turned individual weakness into invincible collective power. They proved that our greatest evolutionary weapon was each other. Deep within these highly protected children lies the final, greatest secret of human evolution. A human infant is, essentially, a fetus forced to leave the womb prematurely. A chimpanzee is born with its brain already 40% developed. It is largely pre-programmed by instinct, but a human child is born with only 25% of its adult brain size. The remaining 75% is entirely molded by the outside world. It is a blank canvas, a biological sponge desperate to absorb every signal from its tribe. The lullabies of the grandmother, the stories told by the fire, the complex rules of society, all are written directly into the folding tissue of the growing brain. During this long, helpless childhood, humans master something no other animal can: complex language. If we were born fully independent like a horse, we would just be another wild animal wandering the plains. But our fatal physical flaws forced us to unite, creating the ultimate evolutionary cheat code. Just as our ancestors survived by supporting each other millions of years ago, I continue to survive in this vast ecosystem because of your support. Every like and subscription is the vital energy I need to keep uncovering our epic history. If you want to continue upgrading your brain, join our tribe. I will see you in the next era.